Mr. Rogers, may he rest in peace, told us pet fish teach children about death. When my daughter Mihaela started bugging me for a pet, she wanted a mammal. So I got her something with fur and a short shelf life, a hamster. Mihaela named her pet Buttercup, and in the end, the hamster taught her the same thing fish do. I was fixing supper when my son Dashiell ran through the kitchen yelling like the town crier, "Mihaela's hamster is dead." We crowded into the hamster end of the house back by the laundry. Mihaela pushed past us to get to the cage first, and clutching her stiff pet to her heart, she let loose with a howl. She didn't have that instinct the rest of us have that makes us not want to touch dead rodents. She rocked on the floor, keening like a mourner at an Irish wake. I sunk down behind her, Mihaela all curled around Buttercup, and me all curled around Mihaela. She had cried plenty in her 8 years, but this was no tantrum. This was that raw, ancient sound of loss. One night, when I was 8 years old, I was lying on the floor watching Roger Mudd on the evening news. My grandmother was parked in her chair, knitting. I was writing a letter to my mother, and had just finished the sentence, "I think Roger Mudd is a funny name." My mom had gone away 3 days before when the ambulance men lifted her off our couch and took her to a nursing home. I didn't understand why she left right before the holidays, but my dad told me she would come back, and I wanted to believe him. She weighed about 80 pounds, and she had a big, scary tumor no one knew I'd seen. But Christian scientists don't tend to say the word cancer out loud. My parents also didn't say things like, "Your mother is dying," or "How do you feel?" They were trying to protect me, but they were in over their heads. They hadn't seen Mr. Rogers. When the telephone rang that night, the man on the other end wouldn't talk to me, so I carried the heavy black phone to my grandmother. She said, "Hello?" "Yes, thank you," and hung up. "Honey," she said to me, "your mama's gone." I had no idea how to act. I didn't move, or talk, or cry. In the movies, when girls got upset, they threw themselves on the bed, so for lack of anything better to do, I started up the stairs. My grandmother's voice was all business. "Honey, you're gonna cry. Now." I tore back down the steps and slammed into her lap, my scrawny girl body flat onto her soft, loose grandma flesh. For a few minutes, we wailed like beasts, but I made sure to stop before my father got home. I knew that much. When I finally started crying again, 10 years later, I realized all that children lose when they can't grieve. Which is why, when Buttercup went to hamster heaven, and Mihaela needed the space to process, well, no child of mine would go without. So help me, Mr. Rogers. Back on the laundry room floor, the wailing had wound down. Mihaela sniffed. "Can I pick some flowers and make a tombstone?" "Of course, sweetheart." "And Mom?" She was starting to get a second wind. "I know we can't afford to have the minister come out to the house, but can we please have a really nice funeral? My daughter actually said this. How could I say no? You bet, baby. The nicest funeral a hamster ever had. I imagined us driving slowly around the block with our headlights on. Maybe somebody would bring us a casserole, and I could take bereavement leave. Now she was on her feet, holding her pet by the paw. Since this is my last night with Buttercup, I want her to be with me, okay? Okay. As it turns out, Buttercup was to preside over our dinner from the head of the table. Unfortunately, the poor animal had died with her arms stuck out in front of her like she was sleepwalking, and even with rigor mortis, her pose made it difficult to prop her upright. Thinking quickly, Mihaela grabbed a candle holder and jammed her pet, ass end first, into the cup part. Buttercup looked like a mascot for the zombie apocalypse. Bon appetit. After supper, Buttercup and Mihaela watched a movie. But after bedtime, I put my foot down, since even I draw the line at sleeping with dead animals. It's not hygienic, honey. Buttercup's body has to go in the freezer now. I stuffed the hamster in next to the ice cream and called it a night. The next morning, Mihaela put the finishing touches on her eulogy and headed out to help her dad dig the grave. She was wearing every article of black clothing she could find and looked just like Jackie Kennedy, if Jackie was 8 and shopped at Goodwill. I'd barely touched my coffee when I heard her out in the yard. "The hole's ready," she yelled. "Where's Buttercup?" I forgot to defrost the hamster. Buttercup was lying in state behind the chocolate mint. I retrieved the deceased and realized why we never freeze a rodent in a candle holder. Buttercup had swollen up overnight, and her hindquarters were now completely stuck. Mihaela was graveside, waiting patiently. I was all for the funeral, but I wasn't about to bury my wedding present with Buttercup's butt. Which is how I found myself that morning, thawing a dead hamster in a pot of boiling water. The candle holder clanked against the side of my spaghetti pot as I stirred. This sort of thing is almost never part of the picture when you imagine becoming a mother. I drained the water off and gave Buttercup a little tug. She popped right out. But the indentation around her middle made it look like she'd spent the night in a corset. Hamsters aren't supposed to have an hourglass figure. Plus, with her fur all soggy, the comparison to a drowned rat was unavoidable. The ritual was rapidly losing its dignity. Maybe this is why Mr. Rogers was such a fan of fish. Maybe if we just dried her hair. Mihaela stood in the doorway. "Mom," she said, "I'm sorry, but it's time to let go of Buttercup." "Coming," I hollered over the noise of the blow dryer. "Just sing one more song." "Thank you."